My husband cheated on me with my sister, but the real shock came when I found out my baby isn't his either. I'm still in shock. As I write this, my whole life feels like it's been flipped upside down, and I honestly don't even know where to start. Part of me feels like this can't be real, but it is. It's all too real. Let me backtrack a bit. My husband Jake and I have been together for 8 years, married for 6. We've been trying for a baby for 5 of those years. It's been hell, to be honest. Miscarriages failed, treatments, endless doctor visits. It's drained us emotionally, physically, you name it. But through it all, Jake was my rock, or at least I thought he was last week. I finally got the news. I've been waiting years to hear. I'm pregnant. I was over the moon. I cried in the doctor's office. I cried in my car. I cried all the way home, just thinking about how excited Jake was going to be. I started planning this big romantic dinner to tell him I even booked a reservation at our favorite restaurant, the same place where Jake proposed to me 6 years ago. It was supposed to be perfect. Instead, it was the worst night of my life. When we got to the restaurant, I noticed Jake was acting weird. He wasn't his usual self. He kept looking around like he was expecting someone to walk in. He was fidgety, not really paying attention to me, and barely touched his drink. At first, I chalked it up to stress. His job has been intense lately, so I figured he had work on his mind. I was trying to lighten the mood, dropping little hints that I had some big news to share, but he just looked uncomfortable. Then right as I was about to tell him, he said, "I need to tell you something first." I laughed nervously, thinking he was going to say something about work, or maybe he'd forgotten an anniversary or something. I had no idea what was coming. He took a deep breath, wouldn't even look me in the eye, and said, "I've been cheating on you." My brain short-circuited. I felt like I didn't hear him right, like maybe he said something else, and my ears just played a cruel trick on me. But no, he said it again, this time, a little quieter. "I've been cheating on you." I froze. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. All I could do was sit there staring at him, trying to process what I just heard. Then, as if that wasn't enough to destroy me, he added, "It's with Lauren, my sister." My sister. I don't even remember what I said in that moment. I think I asked him if he was joking, or maybe I laughed because it felt so absurd, so impossible. But he just sat there looking guilty as hell and said, "I'm sorry. I didn't want you to find out like this at the restaurant, where he proposed to me, the same restaurant where I was about to tell him he was finally going to be a dad after 5 years of trying." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He kept talking, rambling on about how he felt guilty and how he never meant to hurt me. He said it started a few months ago, that it was a mistake, but then he said something that made my stomach drop even further. It wasn't just physical. We connected emotionally, too emotionally. He was connecting with my sister emotionally. While I was at home, injecting myself with hormones and crying myself to sleep, he was out having deep emotional conversations with Lauren. I felt like I was going to throw up. I asked him how long it had been going on, and he admitted it started last year, a whole year. And you know what really broke me? He said they met up at this restaurant before the place that was supposed to be ours. He turned it into their little secret spot. I don't even remember leaving 1 second. I was sitting there, and the next, I was outside in the parking lot, gasping for air. My hands were shaking so badly, I couldn't even call an Uber. I just stood there staring at my phone, trying to decide if I should call my sister or my mom, or maybe just scream into the void. In the end, I just sat in my car and cried when I got home. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I just kept replaying the night over and over in my head, trying to figure out how I missed it. How did I not see the signs? Was I so focused on getting pregnant that I ignored what was happening right in front of me? And Lauren, my own sister, did she hate me this much? Was she jealous? Or was it just about ruining my life for the hell of it? I didn't tell Jake about the pregnancy. I couldn't. It felt cruel to bring a child into this mess, to let him have any piece of the happiness I'd been dreaming about for years. But I couldn't keep this to myself either. I needed answers. So the next day I called Lauren. When she picked up, she sounded normal, like nothing had happened, like she didn't just destroy my life. I said, "Jake told me." There was this long pause, and then she laughed. She actually laughed, and then she said, "Oh, I figured he'd break eventually." I didn't even know what to say. I asked her why she would do this to me. "And do you know what?" she said. "Because you always get everything. And I'm sick of it. I always get everything. The miscarriages, the failed treatments, the depression, the years of feeling like my body was broken. That's everything. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She sounded so smug, so proud of herself, like she'd won some kind of sick game. I hung up on her. I couldn't listen to her voice anymore. But the worst part is, I know this isn't over. I haven't even begun to untangle the mess they've made of my life, and I have no idea what to do next. All I know is that I'm pregnant, and right now that feels like the only thing keeping me going. First update, I never thought I'd be sitting here typing this out for strangers on the internet, but I genuinely don't know what else to do. My life has turned into something out of a bad soap opera, and every time I think it can't get worse, it does buckle up, because this one's a ride. After Jake, my husband, dropped the bomb that he'd been cheating on me with my sister, Lauren, I spent an entire night in a haze. I couldn't stop replaying his words. I thought about every family dinner, every holiday, every little moment when Lauren was around us. Were they sneaking glances? Were they laughing at me behind my back? It felt like my entire life was a lie, but I needed answers. I couldn't just sit there and spiral. So I called Lauren the next day. I expected her to deny it, or maybe cry and beg for forgiveness. What I didn't expect was for her to laugh when I told her Jake had confessed. There was this long pause, and then she just chuckled. Well, she said you should have seen it coming, like I was the idiot for not realizing my husband and sister were sneaking around behind my back. That's when I lost it. I started yelling, asking her how she could do this to me, why she would even think about betraying me like this. Her response, because you've always had everything, and I was sick of it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked her what the hell she was talking about. I mean, what have I ever had that she didn't? We grew up in the same house, had the same parents, went to the same schools. If anything, Lauren was the golden child. She was the pretty one, the smart one, the one my parents doted on. I was the quiet, awkward one in her shadow, but apparently in her twisted mind, I always got what I wanted, and then she said it. You've got the perfect husband, the perfect life, and all anyone ever talks about is how strong you are for trying to have a baby. I was sick of hearing about you. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone. She was jealous of me. She was jealous of the years I spent crying myself to sleep, the miscarriages, the heartbreak, the endless doctor appointments and injections. She was jealous of my pain. I told her she was insane, that she needed help, but she just laughed again and said, "You're not as perfect as you think, and neither is your marriage." That's when she told me they'd been meeting up for over a year, not just a few months, like Jake had said, a year, and apparently they were as careful as they thought, because she let it slip that one of their favorite places to meet was my house, the place where I live, where I sleep, where I'd been pouring my heart into building a family. They'd been sneaking around under my nose, laughing at me the whole time I hung up on her. After that, I couldn't listen to her smug voice for another second, but the anger didn't stop. I started thinking about all the times over the past year when things didn't feel right, when something was off, and it all started clicking into place. There was the time Jake came home late from work and smelled like Lauren's perfume. I'd even joke about it, saying, "You smell like my sister." He laughed it off, saying they'd hugged at a family party earlier that day. I didn't think anything of it. Then there was the time Lauren showed up at our house unannounced while Jake was working from home. I'd walked in and found them sitting on the couch, looking way too cozy. When I asked what was going on, Lauren said she'd stopped by to check on him because he seemed stressed. I remember feeling weird about it, but I pushed it aside because who wants to believe their sister and husband are having an affair? The more I thought about it, the more I realized there were a million little red flags I'd ignored, like the way Jake always seemed to light up when Lauren walked into a room, or how Lauren would go out of her way to compliment him in front of me. I thought they were just being friendly. I trusted them. I decided I couldn't keep this to myself anymore, so I called my mom. I thought she'd be on my side, that she'd be just as horrified as I was. But instead, she tried to downplay it. "I'm sure it's not what you think," she said. "Lauren's always been close with Jake. Maybe you're overreacting. That's what she said to me, like I was the crazy one for being upset that my husband and sister were sleeping together. I don't know if she didn't believe me or if she just didn't want to deal with the drama, but it felt like another betrayal. And then came the kicker. Lauren had already told her she'd called my mom the night before and spun the whole thing as if I was the problem. She told her I was too obsessed with getting pregnant and that Jake had needed someone to talk to. My mom actually had the nerve to say, "Maybe you should have been paying more attention to your marriage." That was it for me. I hung up and haven't spoken to her since I realized in that moment that I couldn't rely on my family for support. They were either too blind or too selfish to see what was really happening. But it didn't end there. Later that night, I started thinking about all the times Jake and Lauren had helped me through the hardest parts of our fertility journey. The time Lauren brought over wine after my first miscarriage. The time Jake insisted we invite her on a weekend getaway to cheer me up. I'd thought they were being supportive. Now I realized they were probably just using me as an excuse to spend more time together, and then, because I clearly hadn't been hurt enough, I found out something else. While scrolling through Jake's phone, yeah, I went there. I found a string of texts between him and Lauren in one of them. She said, "I don't know how much longer I can keep this a secret. I have no idea what she meant, but I can't shake the feeling that there's something even bigger they're hiding." I thought confronting Lauren would give me closure, but it's only made things worse. I don't know who I can trust anymore. All I know is that I'm pregnant, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to protect my baby from this toxic mess. Second update. If you thought the first 2 parts of this saga were bad, buckle up, because it gets even worse. I didn't think my life could fall apart any more than it already had. But apparently I was wrong. At this point, it feels like someone's writing my life as a really bad TV drama after I confronted my sister Lauren, and she basically admitted she didn't care about what she'd done. I decided to take a step back. I needed to process everything, focus on myself, and figure out what I was going to do about my pregnancy. I wasn't ready to tell Jake yet. I didn't even know if I wanted to keep the baby. But then Lauren decided she wasn't done messing with me about a week after our fight. I got a text from her. No apology, no acknowledgement of how she destroyed my life. Just this: "We need to talk. It's important." I didn't want to deal with her, but curiosity got the better of me against my better judgment. I agreed to meet her at a C-shop. I thought maybe she'd finally grown a conscience. Spoiler alert. She hadn't when I got there. She looked nervous. I remember thinking, good, you should be, but then she dropped another bomb on me. "I think I might be pregnant," she said. Just like that. No preamble. No softening the blow, and then she added, "And it's probably Jake's." I think I actually laughed when she said it. Not because it was funny, but because my brain couldn't process it. It was like my body didn't know how else to react. I asked her if she was serious, and she just nodded. She said she hadn't taken a test yet, but she was late, and she just had a feeling. At that point I lost it. I asked her if she'd lost her damn mind. Did she really think this was the way to tell me? Did she think I was going to help her? She just shrugged and said, "I thought you'd want to know." Want to know. Like this was some casual bit of gossip and not my entire life crumbling into pieces. I told her she needed to take a test and let me know for sure before I even thought about talking to her again. And then I walked out. I couldn't sit there and listen to her any longer that night. I finally told Jake about the pregnancy. I didn't want to, but I couldn't keep it to myself any longer. I wanted to see his reaction, to figure out if there was any chance we could salvage our marriage. At first, he looked genuinely happy. He even cried for a split second. I thought, maybe we could find a way to move past everything. But then I dropped the bomb about Lauren. I told him she might be pregnant too, and that she thought he was the father. His face went white. He stammered out something about how it couldn't be true, but I could tell he was lying. He knew there was a chance, and that's when I knew it was over. I couldn't stay with someone who betrayed me so deeply, and not just once, but over and over again. The next few days were a blur. Lauren eventually texted me, saying she'd taken a test, and it was positive. She wanted to meet again, but I ignored her. I couldn't deal with her anymore. Instead, I told Jake we needed to get a paternity test for both pregnancies. If he was going to be a father, I needed to know whether it was my child or hers. The paternity test results came back about 2 weeks later. Jake was the father of Lauren's baby, and thank God he wasn't the father of mine. I don't think I've ever felt so many conflicting emotions at once: relief that my child wasn't his, rage that he'd gotten my sister pregnant, heartbreak over the fact that my marriage was truly completely over. I told Jake to pack his things and get out. He tried to beg for forgiveness, saying he'd cut Lauren out of his life and do whatever it took to make things right, but it was too late. He'd already destroyed everything I told him. I didn't care what he did, as long as he stayed out of my life and out of my baby's life. As for Lauren, I've completely cut her off. My parents keep trying to get me to forgive her, saying family is family and we all make mistakes. But this wasn't a mistake. This was a calculated betrayal, and I'll never forgive her for it. She and Jake deserve each other, and I hope they're miserable together. It's been a few months now, and I'm finally starting to feel like myself again. I've moved into a new apartment, started therapy, and started planning for my baby's arrival. It hasn't been easy, but for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful about the future. The craziest part, I found out from a mutual friend that Jake and Lauren are already having problems. Apparently, Jake isn't as thrilled about being a father as he pretended to be, and Lauren's starting to realize she might have made a huge mistake. Karmas. As for me, I'm done with both of them. My baby and I are going to be just fine without them. And honestly, I think this whole nightmare has made me stronger. I never thought I'd be able to say this, but I'm actually looking forward to what's next. Let's just hope my kid never asks about their father, because I wouldn't even know where to start. Final update. This is the hardest thing I've ever had to admit, even anonymously. If you've been following my story, you know, my husband Jake cheated on me with my sister Lauren. You know, he got her pregnant, and I thought that was the worst of it. But here's the thing, I'm not innocent either. I didn't plan to reveal this, but after the paternity test confirmed Jake wasn't the father of my baby, I knew I couldn't hide it anymore. So here goes. Let me back up a bit. When Jake and I were deep in the middle of our fertility struggles, our marriage was already strained. Every failed treatment, every negative test, every miscarriage. It felt like one more brick in the wall between us, Jake would withdraw, and I'd throw myself deeper into trying to fix things we weren't connecting. And for a long time, I blamed myself for not being enough for him. Then one night, about a year ago, I went out for drinks with some coworkers. I hadn't planned to stay out late, but the night stretched on one of my coworkers. Ethan had always been flirty with me, but I never thought much of it that night, though. After one too many drinks and a lot of venting about how lonely I felt in my marriage, I let my guard down. We ended up at his place. I told myself it was a one-time thing, that it didn't mean anything, and that I'd never let it happen again. And for a long time, I didn't. I shoved it deep down and tried to focus on my marriage, on fixing what was broken. I never told Jake, and I convinced myself it was just a stupid mistake. But here's the thing. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a symptom of how broken we were, of how far apart we drifted. I should have addressed it. Then, I should have been honest with myself and with Jake about how unhappy I was. Instead, I buried it fast forward to a few months later. Jake and I were still struggling, but I thought we were turning a corner. I was determined to make things work, so I threw myself even harder into our fertility journey. That's when I found out I was pregnant. At the time, I didn't even think twice about who the father was. Jake and I were still intimate, and I told myself it had to be his. But after everything blew up with Lauren and the paternity test confirmed Jake wasn't the father, I had to face the truth. The timing lined up too perfectly. The baby wasn't Jake's, it was Ethan's. When I realized this, I felt sick to my stomach. I thought about all the times I'd cried, screamed, and demanded answers from Jake about his betrayal. All the righteous anger I felt about him cheating on me with my sister, and now I was just as guilty. I'd been so focused on his lies that I'd ignored my own. I debated whether or not to tell him he was already out of the picture. He'd moved out after we got the paternity test results and had been keeping his distance. Part of me thought, what's the point? He's not the father, and we're over anyway. But another part of me knew I needed to be honest for my own sake, if nothing else. So I called him. I told him the truth. I told him about Ethan and that the baby wasn't his. At first he laughed bitterly and said, well, I guess we're even then, huh? But then his tone shifted. He sounded almost relieved. At least now. I know, he said. At least now. It all makes sense. And you know what? He was right. As much as it hurt to admit our marriage had been broken for a long time, we both made choices that reflected that his betrayal with Lauren, my affair with Ethan, it was all part of the same bigger picture. Neither of us was happy, and neither of us had the courage to face it until everything fell apart. After that, I reached out to Ethan. I hadn't spoken to him since that night a year ago, and I had no idea how he'd react when I told him about the baby. He was stunned. He asked if I was sure, and I told him about the paternity test. He said he needed time to process it, and I said, I understood. It's been a few weeks since that conversation, and I still don't know what's going to happen. Ethan hasn't reached out again, and honestly, I'm okay with that. I don't want to force him into anything he's not ready for right now. My focus is on me and my baby. Here's what I've learned through all of this: life is messy. People are flawed, and sometimes there's no clear villain or victim. Jake and Lauren were wrong to betray me, but I was wrong too. None of us handled our pain in a healthy way, and we all hurt each other because of it. That doesn't mean I forgive Jake or Lauren or that I'm excusing what they did. What they did was cruel and selfish, and it's going to take me a long time to fully heal from it. But I also have to own my part in this. I'm not perfect, and pretending I am won't help me move forward. So here's where I stand. Now I'm cutting ties with Jake and Lauren completely. My parents keep pressuring me to make amends, but I'm done. I need to focus on myself and my baby, not on fixing relationships that were toxic to begin with. As for Ethan, I don't know what the future holds. Maybe he'll step up. Maybe he won't. Either way, I know I can handle this on my own. I've been through hell and back, and I'm still standing. That has to count for something, right? Life isn't perfect, and neither am I, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm finally ready to move forward one step at a time.